9mm versus 38 Special Federal Hydrashok. And I'm going to test these on my mid-sized guns here. My Taurus 856 with a 3-inch barrel and my Ruger Security 9 with a 4-inch barrel. Basically, you got the same amount of barrel travel there, and the guns overall are about the same size. Our 9mm is a 124 grain. Our 38 Special is a +P and is a 129 grain. I'm not specifically picking them that way. The 9mm only comes in a standard pressure, and the closest bullet weight we have for our 38 Special is our 129 grain +P. So I've been curious about this stuff for a very long time. I've tested it here and there, but what I've mostly been curious about is back about 15 years ago, I purchased my first semi-automatic pistol. It was a Ruger P95. Very similar size to this Ruger Security 9. Had a 3.9-inch barrel. This has a 4-inch barrel. And I went to the gun store and I picked up some ammo. And at the time, basically critical defense, HST and stuff like that, I don't think it really existed to the general public the way it does now. So basically they gave me what the best option was at the time, and that was Federal Hydrashok 124 grain. And I only had that gun for probably 9 months, and I moved on to something else. But I've been curious all this time, if I would have had to use that for defense and about that 4-inch barrel, you know, how well would it have worked for me? So I'm going to test this through this 4-inch barrel and see what we get. So our 9mm, it's rated at, I have no idea because I don't see it on the box in the front like they often normally do with ammos. On the back here, 1120 feet per second. So that's about average for a 124 grain. Our 38 Special +P, we are rated at 950 feet per second. That's pretty average for velocity rating. So we're going to go through the current graph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. And my guns have a little bit shorter barrel than the rated, I believe. Our 9mm I think is rated through a 4-inch, but our 38 through a 4-inch also, and I'm using a 3-inch. So we're going to go into our plain clear ballistics gel test here. Just plain clear ballistics on the first shot to see what we get for our best potential. The reason why I do that is sometimes when you do ammo tests and you always have denim in the way, you can never get a hollow point to expand. So it's good to just go into plain clear ballistics to see what it's supposed to look like when it expands, and then do a test that's a little bit more difficult for the ammo. My real world test where I have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard to represent ribs or sternum. That'll be more of our real world test that we'll do also. And then I am going to shoot at the steel to see what kind of practical accuracy, recoil control, and all that I can get. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, let's run our 9mm 124 grain Hydrashok 4-inch barrel, rated at 1120 feet per second. I'm about 5 yards from that target. Let's see how close I get to 1120 feet per second. (1022), 1014, 1034, 1012, 1002. So very much below the rated velocity. I'm really surprised at how low that is. That's not good. Now it's a 38 Special +P, rated at 950 feet per second, I believe through a 4-inch barrel. If we get close to that, you know, this 3-inch barrel does tend to run kind of fast compared to others, but let's see what we get here. (931), 951, 952, 972, 939. So we're pretty much right at our rated velocity averages through the 3-inch barrel. So, you know, even though our 9mm is more powerful, you know, being 100 feet per second or more below the rated velocity versus this being at the rated velocity through a shorter barrel, I'm more impressed with this 38 Special right now. But the 9mm still is moving faster, but the 38 has a larger hollow cavity. Let's see how they compare when we hit our ballistics gel block. All right, we'll do our best potential shot in the plain clear ballistics, no denim in the way or anything like that. Let's see how our 9mm does. All right, let me hit that with our 38 Special now. Let's go take a look. All right, so in some respects, kind of similar performance here. Our first 3-inch piece, our 9mm on the bottom, our 38 on top, a little bit more energy dump with our 9mm. So when you see big tearing marks like that, it just simply means the bullet is trying to expand within that first 3 inches, which is what I consider our pectoral muscle. And a lot of people say, whoa, who's your attacker, Arnold? No, well, you know, about 2 to 3 inches of clear ballistics actually represents skin because of the elasticity of it. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio when we look at these penetration numbers. So I like to see that, how we're getting, you know, some energy dump in the first 3 inches. The question is, will it continue to energy dump when there's denim in the way? So what we got going on here is pretty good damage. It does almost look like tumbling damage with our 9mm once we get to about the 9-inch mark. But up here, it actually looks like on top, our 38 Special has more tearing damage. And if you could see it closely, I don't know if you guys can or not, but you see this is a weird clear ballistics phenomenon down here on the bottom where there's bubbling. And that really happens mostly from tumbling. If you look up here, there's little tiny cuts on the top channel there. That more indicates what you see when large copper petals are cutting. But what we got going on here with our 9mm is a really good penetration of about 17.5 inches. So that's pretty ideal, actually. Now when we look at our 38 Special, there's a little bit less, but we're still at 14.5 inches of penetration. So both of these seem acceptable. I can't see through the block right now to see how much expansion we got, but judging from its penetration, it's not over penetrating. They probably did expand pretty well, and both of them have acceptable penetration. So let's put on our denim, put in our MDF, see how they compare in more of our real world simulation. All right, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, a 1/4 inch MDF to represent our ribs. Let's see how our 9mm does. All right, now let's set that with our 38 Special. Let's go take a look. All right, we got some smoke and dieseling type stuff going on here. Here's our impacts through our MDF, our 9mm on the bottom, 38's on top. Honestly, what I'm looking at is I don't see any evidence of expansion with either of these. But we did get a little bit of energy dump in that first 3 inches. What's interesting here, I do see some issues right here. This is dieseling this gel a little bit. That's where that smoke is coming from with our 9mm. So our 9mm still hit really hard and did a lot of damage, as did our 38 Special. Our 9mm definitely did more damage, but what we're looking at here is a little bit of over penetration. Now, I don't really see any evidence of hollow point expansion. We're at 20 3/4 inches of penetration. That's not too bad for over penetration, but it is just a little bit over penetrating. With our 38 Special, we got 15 inches of penetration, so actually that's more ideal. So looking at this ballistic test here, you know, would the 9mm have worked for me way back then? Well, you know, it's still a 9mm, it's still got power, and it's not over penetrating, you know, out 2 blocks. And when it doesn't over penetrate, what that is telling you is that there is some sort of mechanism that's making it slow down a little bit. And if that's happening, you're putting that damage into the target rather than it just simply slipping right through. So you often get more damage with a non-expanding hollow point than what you do with like a full metal jacket, because the flat is still, or the front is still flat and it's still tearing pretty good. So, you know, I don't think it would have failed me, but it doesn't look like a very good choice, to be honest. Now with our 38 Special, in all technical senses here, our 38 Special did better in this test because we did not have any over penetration. Now, did it pass FBI protocol? No, but what we have with our 9mm is essentially 2 fails with our denim and MDF shot. You know, over penetration and no expansion, as where our 38 Special only had 1 fail. We just didn't get expansion to the MDF, you know, but we got more ideal penetration. So yeah, our 38 Special did better here technically. Now, does that mean the 38 would be more effective on the street? No, I think both of these would probably do about as well as each other. But you know, just adding up the score here, our 38 did a little bit better. So let's pull these out of the block, take a close-up look at them. Then I'm going to shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy I get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's our 9mm, and here's our 38 Special. So our 38 Special expanded looks bigger to me than the 9mm. I think that's partly because it does have a larger hollow cavity to begin with, as where the 9mm is kind of small because it's got to be, because it's a semi-auto cartridge and you got to have that narrow enough to feed well. So our plain gel, our 38, looks a lot better to me. Now it's kind of the opposite going through our medium density fiberboard. Our 38 Special got pretty much no expansion at all through our medium density fiberboard. And our 9mm, from what it looked like we had no expansion whatsoever from the side view, but when I pulled this bullet out, there is some pedal expansion. So, you know, I just said that, you know, the point-wise system, I think our 38 did a little better. Well, you got to factor this in too. A little bit bigger through our MDF and denim versus pretty much none, but bigger with the 38 through plain gel. So I would say both of these are about even in how well they did. You know, the 9mm didn't, you know, spank the 38 Special and really win there. If we're talking a competition, I don't like the word competition when we're talking about stuff like this, because, you know, a lot of times it's not either or, it's both. You can have both cartridges, and, you know, which one will do better, which one will do worse. Well, you carry both of them, you know, whatever. But what we're looking at here is, you know, mediocre performance, but between 38 and 9mm, I don't think you're really going to have much of an advantage with one versus the other, to be honest, unless you're talking capacity. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 12 yards from the target. I just want to see what kind of practical accuracy and follow-up shots and recoil I can do. I'm going to fire 6 shots. I know people would be like, oh, this revolver only has 6 and you got all this high capacity with 9mm, so 9mm wins. But average shots fired still are 1 to 5 in your typical self-defense encounter. So I want to see how 6 shots will do for me. So I'm just going to line up my sights here, and I'm just going to get a nice front sight picture before I start firing, just to kind of see, you know, how the recoil feels between this and that revolver. And by the way, the guns weigh about the same amount. So let's see what we get here. 9mm. All right, looks like I pulled one, but yeah, very tight group, except for, you know, pulling a couple there. So it looks pretty good for me. Now our 38 Special, let's see what this does for me. So this gun does shoot a little bit to the left for me. Group opened up a little bit, and obviously there's a much harder trigger pull, so that plays into this a little bit. But, you know, the actual amount of foot-pounds recoil in your hand, you can't really tell much of a difference. They both were pretty light recoil. So let me back it up a little bit, see how they continue to shoot for me. All right, why not fire a few shots from my 25-yard marker? So let me see how a few of these will do 25 yards. All right, somehow I pulled one pretty high. Let's see what I can do with our 38 Special. All right, so these are definitely shooting again to the left for me. So let me back it up a little more. All right, 40 yards just for the heck of it. 9mm. All right, 38 Special. I'm gonna aim to the right now. Last one was a little bit too far to the right. That's one of those fun challenge things, you know, when it's off, it gradually gets a little bit further off at distance. I don't know where they're going to hit, so you have to experiment a little bit. So now, just for fun, I'm going to go back to 75 yards. All right, 75 yards from the target. Every time I come back here, you know, I think about my previous videos, and I'm thinking, yeah, it is kind of stupid. A lot of people complain about it. It's not practical. But then when I'm out here, it's like, It is so much fun. I don't know why it's so much fun, but it is, to try to hit a target from 75 yards with a handgun. I enjoy it, so I always end up doing it. So 9mm. Let's see how this stuff shoots for me. I think I went a little bit right. A little bit high right. A little bit right again. I'll hold a little bit left. Alright, so gotta hold just a little bit right or left, because these are shooting a little bit to the right, and the 38 Special is doing the opposite, it's shooting a little bit to the left. So let me fire one single action, hold a little bit to the right, and see if I can make any hits. So I can't tell where my impacts are hitting, but basically all the times I've hit, I was holding on like the very furthest right portion of that target, like an inch into it. When I held off the target to the right, I missed. So I'll keep trying to do that, what I was doing. So I think they might actually be going low as well. It's hard to tell from this distance, to be honest. So looking at this, you know, and we got to get this 75-yard par out of the way. You know, forget about this. This is pointless. I just do it for fun, and a few people like to see it. But looking at this ammo, going into this, you know, thinking that, you know, this 9mm would perform really well. You know, it's rare to see a 9mm that doesn't perform in gel. And that's not to say that 9mm is better. What you see a lot of times is there's a lot of 9mm rounds that are developed specifically to be just enough, you know, good of a design that will open up in gel, but might not necessarily open up the hollow point when you're going into an actual target. But you know, I thought for sure at least would open up in gel with denim in there, because that's what the Hydrashok post is for, you know, to keep denim and stuff like that from clogging it. So it's obvious why Federal made the HST and not just stuck with the Hydrashok. The Hydrashok doesn't seem like it's working very well. So going into this, I thought for sure that 9mm performed well, and it, you know, it really didn't. Our 38 Special, I kind of knew that, you know, 38 Special Hydrashok wasn't that great of ammo. But looking at the 38 Special, it looks like it did about what you would expect a 38 Special to do. You know, not too bad a performance. I've seen a lot worse, but I've seen better also. But with the great majority of 38 Special, it does pretty much what this one did. So that's a pretty average 38 Special. Now, when we look at our 9mm though, you know, like I said, it's very rare that we don't get hollow point expansion, even through denim and stuff like that. So the fact that we didn't get it means it didn't perform all that well. And our rate of velocity was just absolutely awful. Awful rate of velocity, you know, compared to what we actually got. Because 4-inch semi-auto for a 9mm is the industry standard, just like 5-inch is the standard for 10mm, and 4-inch revolvers are the standard for revolver cartridges, usually. But looking at this, yeah, we're pretty mediocre ammo. Not much else I can say about it. So, you know, would I pick this if I had nothing else? And the answer would be absolutely yes, because Federal Hydrashok is a law enforcement grade ammo. They seal the primers and they seal the bullet ends. So if you got the ammo in your gun for a long time, you know it's probably going to fire. It's not going to get sweat and everything going up in there and not work. So that's a thing that I think sometimes is overlooked by a lot of people. So that in and of itself, yes, I would absolutely choose it if I didn't have anything else. But would I pick this over HST, even critical defense? No. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.